And it's another live stream coming to you, and all we're talking about is cybersecurity topics. Specifically today, we're talking about the job interview. Now, this whole episode was a little unplanned. Usually I promote these things out a little bit further in advance, but last night I was looking on Twitter and I came across BlueTeamBlog's post here around, you're interviewing someone for a security analyst role. What do you ask them? And I thought this was really interesting and really telling because, many of us are always looking about what interview questions do we need to ask, or what are we going to be asked? How do we prepare? We're going to cram before an interview, all these things. And we never really stop to think about, there's another person on the other side of the table and they are asking questions, not, what port is telnet? It's not about that. There's many other questions, and there's really an explanation behind why certain questions are asked. And this tweet really turned into a thread, and a lot of people whom I respect on Twitter were chiming in and providing things. And I thought, you know what, this would be awesome to share with the Simply Cyber community and people who are new to Simply Cyber, to come on and talk about these things and really give you the perspective. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pull up the tweet. I'm going to go through them. I've only looked at some of them, and I am going to read the tweet. I'm going to tell you what I think the point of the question is, so you can understand what the mindset would be from that interviewer, and then what a good answer would be, not specifically verbatim, like you're not going to repeat what I tell you, but the way you contextualize it. And I'm telling you, I really think this is going to be a very valuable exercise for people out there, especially if you're in the job market, especially if you have an upcoming interview. I really think there's going to be some value in that. So I'm super pumped. Feel free to jump on the call, throw a question in. If this is your first live stream with Simply Cyber, I do have an agenda, but I will deviate from it to promote engagement and just have a good time. I've dropped a link to the Discord channel that we use when we're not live streaming and stuff, so you can stay connected with the program. So let's go right into it. Where are we? Here we go. Okay, so here's the tweet. Hopefully my network connectivity stays good. Here we go. Okay, so here's the tweet, right? You're interviewing someone for security analyst role. Hold on, let me change my branding up here. Okay, cool. You're interviewing for a security analyst role. You're going to ask them one question. Okay, now some of these, by the way, some of these are like jokes or whatever, and that's fine. We'll have some fun today. But this first one is brilliant, right? Christian Toon chimed in here. One question I heard recently, hopefully you guys can see this, is tell me about the security on your home network. Okay, this is a brilliant question, people. Brilliant question. Okay, tell me about the security on your home network. Now, a couple of things are assumed here. One, that you have home internet, right? But many people do. So, that question isn't really out of bounds or off limits or really weird to ask. Now, cybersecurity as a practice, it's really more than just a 9-to-5 job, okay? Like most people who work in cybersecurity, it's a lifestyle, it's a mindset. You're not going to go to work and secure assets for your business and then come home and have this ridiculously loose, open security. You're not going to go to Starbucks and just, have your stuff out there. You're not going to go to the bathroom and leave your computer unlocked, right? Like in a public place. You wouldn't do that. So it's a mindset. So asking about how you secure your home network is very telling. A, because you probably didn't think that question would come up. And B, because it shows the interviewer, me, right? Because let's pretend I'm the interviewer, right? It shows me, have you even thought about securing your home network? If you have, what have you done? Explain it to me. This is going to tell me two things. One, to what level of actual interest do you have in cybersecurity if you're doing it on your personal time? Two, what have you done? Are you going to get technical and say you went into the router config and changed that? Are you going to say that you ensured that the wireless was, configured for WPA2? Are you going to know some of that language, some of that vocabulary? And I really think that's the root of it. You can go super simple and say, oh, like I use wireless and it's secure. Like to me, that means you really don't know exactly what you're talking about, right? Like you know it's secure. Like what does that even mean? Explain to me, what does secure mean? That might be a follow-up question for that. But if you say, oh, I configured it for this, I mean, maybe you go as far as to say I've segmented my network. So I have my IoT devices like my Ring doorbell and my Google Home on a separate network than my personal stuff. That's certainly an angle. So I think the home network is a fantastic question, because I'd really like you to think about it for a minute and say, what have you done for your home network? And could you clearly convey it to somebody in simple sentences to be able to make them understand that you know what you're talking about? Brilliant question, by the way. Moving on. Okay, so can you hack a Facebook account for me? So if you're not in the industry, like this is a pretty common one for people who work in the industry to get the question asked of them. It's almost like it's almost like a milestone. I got asked for the first time last year if I could break into someone's Facebook account. And I actually saw it as a rite of passage. So this is really just kind of an inside industry joke here. So let's see. Let's see. Oh, this isn't it. Airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow. That's a Monty Python joke. Very funny. Okay, so the Adam here would throw an open-ended scenario at them. You're interviewing a security analyst. All right, that's just for the memes. I will say though that open-ended scenarios are good, again, because they drive the interviewee to think kind of creatively. And really, like, let's just stop back for a second. I interview people for my team all the time, okay? And like, you've probably heard this, but if you haven't, you're going to hear it now. Like, I can teach you hard skills, right? I can teach you how to run a vulnerability scanner. I can teach you how to configure something, whatever it is. Like initiative, creativity, analytical capability, interest, like your thought process, all of those things I can't teach you. Those are who you are. And that is what I need to know who I am talking to when I'm interviewing you. Yeah, you do have to have minimum, credentials or knowledge base. You can be the best person in the world, but if you can't do like the minimum stuff, obviously. But what I mean is you don't have to have the specific skill. Like, you don't need to know, like we have Fortinet firewalls. You don't need to know how to use a Fortinet firewall. I can teach you that. I can send you to training. But if you understand how firewalls work, how a network works, and you have this creative analytical thing, that'll be brilliant. So just a note on open-ended questions. Hopefully we'll get to them. How much for your passion? This is a joke question. Oh, here's a great one. So Casey said, if a company has no InfoSec tools, what is the first thing you would implement? Now, I will tell you, so I've interviewed, over my career or whatever. I've been asked variations of this question. Like, you go on site and it's a client and they have nothing, or they are expanding to AWS and they haven't configured anything. Like, what's the first thing they do? Like, there's variations of this question, but the idea is that there's nothing in place. Where do you prioritize? What's the first thing you do? Yeah, this question can apply to CISOs all the way down to security analysts. Now, what's really interesting about this question is there's a lot of things that are not informed here, and this is probably my first pro tip, if I could give you one. Like, if you're going to answer this question, before you get all flummoxed and bent up on patch things or vulnerability scanner, right? Like, think about for a second, get a clear picture in your mind of what you're being asked. If a company had no tools, what's the first thing you would implement? What kind of company is it? What kind of data are they holding? How many people do they have? Are they in the cloud? Do they have international offices? Is GDPR involved? Put it back on the interviewer to qualify the question. They will have to, because they can't not give you more detail, right? It's a fictitious scenario that they're trying to get you, but by asking probing questions and beginning to frame the question, you can then begin to give, substantive answers that aren't just CIS 20, right? Like you can give substantive answers that are interesting and get to the root of like whatever that picture is that they draw for you. But it also shows that you're thinking, right? You're analytical. Like, how can I analyze the answer to this question if I don't have all the information I need? I need to know the company. Like, there might be things you don't know, right? Like there could be shadow IT or something like that. But like, what kind of company is it? What kind of data? Like, what's their business about? Like, are they into, is it Ticketmaster or is it a public library, right? So there are nuances there that you need to understand. So, by the way, okay, so I think this is a good one. I think you swing and miss if you just say something like multi-factor, right? Or you just say something like patch all the things. You definitely don't, you want to give a more full answer on not just what tools you would do first, but also why you would do first, right? And another thing, like make sure when you're responding to interview questions, this goes for any question. When you're responding to interview questions, stick to answering the question. I have been in some interviews where, the person doesn't really know, or they have some idea and they just wander off and start talking about something completely different because, they feel compelled to speak for 5 minutes on a question. And it actually hurts more than it helps when you're not responding to the actual question, because you're just wasting time. So don't do that. Now, to this particular one, if a company had no InfoSec tools, what is the first thing that you would implement? That's interesting because it's not, usually the question is like, if you don't have any information security, anything, what's the first thing you do? Because like, if you want to go policies, procedures, you could go that route. You could do a risk assessment on it, but those aren't tools. So like a SIEM might be useful, but you need staff to run the SIEM. This person actually said, Tone says, run Nmap, kind of joking, but basically like a network analysis tool to see like what nodes are on your network, vulnerability scanner. There isn't a right answer to this, by the way. There's no like definitive right answer that the industry knows. They're really trying to see what you know and what you're comfortable with. So again, frame the question, push it back on the interviewer. And then two, another thing that is going to inform the interviewer about you implicitly without you saying anything is that if you lean directly into the tech, right? You're like, you got to get a SIEM, got to get that visibility on the logs. You got to know what's going on there. Like they know, like if you are comfortable going right there first, you're telling them that you are comfortable with SIEM and you understand SIEM tech, right? If you're like, oh, you got to, like this individual here, you got to do an Nmap, you got to see the assets, right? Well, this is an interesting response because of two things. One, like CIS top 20 controls. The first one is like hardware inventory, right? That you can see everything. If you don't know everything on your network, how can you secure the network, right? Because if you just have like this shadow IT thing over here. But what I'm saying is this answer has some tech to it and some kind of overarching cybersecurity program framework. So like if someone said this to me, Nmap, you got to know what assets exist on the network. I like that answer. And I might even say, why is it important to know what assets are on? Like I might follow up on that question to probe to see if they understand why they're saying that. And I assume that they do. And that's a great response. Like you want to have that kind of organic back and forth and dig deep. Okay. So hopefully you guys are enjoying this. I'm seeing some people from Boston in here. How much of the salary is pro day, 8 hours of work for a tier one? Whoa. So Pino on YouTube saying how much of the salaries for professional day, 8 hours of work. I guess you're saying like what's a 40-hour work week career, tier one, tier two, tier three, SOC leader. Those, just so you know, those questions are really difficult to answer. Stefan actually responded by saying go to Glassdoor if you want a salary, but I'll just tell you really quick, like salaries are difficult because the salary in San Francisco to do the exact same job for a salary in Omaha, Nebraska are going to pay two wildly different salaries. Now, with the pandemic and the way the remote workforce, that's kind of changing, but that's not the point. The point is your question has to be way more qualified to be able to give any kind of like good answer. So that's a tough one, Pin. All right, and Stefan, thanks for jumping in there and responding. All right, so continuing to go down. Let's see, favorite alcoholic drink. Probably wouldn't get asked that in an interview. Okay, there are questions that are off limits. And by the way, if you get asked questions in an interview that make you uncomfortable, or the person is like barking at you, I know in this job market, sometimes it feels like desperate to get a job. And some people might be in a situation where they really don't have a choice. But just remember, it's a two-way street. You're interviewing them for fit also, right? So don't feel marginalized or feel forced into something that you don't want, right? It's a two-way street, the interview. I'll just leave it at that, okay? What excites you about the role? Okay, so that's a good one. I actually asked this one quite a bit. What excites you about the role? I typically phrase it as why do you want to work in cybersecurity? Typically with like the entry level roles, when they haven't already worked in cyber, I'll say, why do you want to work in cybersecurity? What is it? Or when I'm doing internships, the reason being, I want to understand what is this candidate's mindset. Oftentimes that they have a misconception of what cybersecurity is in the first place. They think it's like Mr. Robot all the time, everywhere. Like we're just running around with hoodies, breaking into stuff. And while there is a field in cybersecurity called ethical hacking, pen testing, whatever you want to call it, bug bounty, that does have that, that's not the only thing, right? So what excites you about the role? If they say that, you might not even, they might be interviewing for like an audit position or a SecOps position. And I mean, that actually kind of tells you that they don't even know what they're really interviewing for. Also, if they give you this is me personally, if I ask you that question, what excites you about the role, or what's your passion for cybersecurity? And I get like a shrug of the shoulders or like a meh, like, like I said earlier, like cybersecurity is a mindset, it's a lifestyle, it's a passion, and it's not just a job, right? I mean, you can just get paid for it, but like really to be successful at it, I've always worked in cybersecurity. I was a software developer for a little bit outside of college, but for the most part, it's always been cyber for me. So I don't know if it's like that in other industries and other fields, but for me, you got to have the passion for it in order to bring it, because it's a tough game, right? I mean, you're always defending. So this is a great question. And I guess what I would advise you to do is when someone asks you what excites you or why do you want this job or whatever, be genuine. People can sniff fraud. Like it's like a sixth sense for humans, right? If someone's being disingenuous and fraudulent to you, they will, like, it, right? So if someone asks you this and you lie to their face, they're going to know it, and it's not going to fare well for you. Okay. Unless you're like, capable of just straight up pathologically lying to people. But we're going to just remove that. Okay. So I would be genuine. Maybe it's cybersecurity in general. Maybe you love IT and you saw someone or you saw a video on cybersecurity or you heard about it. I mean, it's in the news every day, right? Maybe it's the money. There's nothing shameful about that. I want to make a lot of money to support my family, meet my financial goals. And cybersecurity is a multi-billion dollar industry. I want to get paid. And I can do this job. Okay. That's fine. That's totally fine. Okay. All right. Moving on here. I would ask them what was their most exciting security project they worked on this year, or how a piece of malware traverses from attackers to victim using the OSI model. It depends on the person. Oh my gosh. So JS formula, those are two wildly different questions. So most exciting security project they worked on this year. That is not an unfair question. Okay. So if you're if you're trying to get into cybersecurity, like if you're working in the field, then you probably have some security project you worked on. But if you're trying to get in cybersecurity, and I advise people to do this all the time, you got to level up. You got to skill up, right? And there's a ton of free resources out there. And I'll show you. If you go to here, I'm going to put in the comments. If you go to my website, right? If you go to my website, there's a link at the top that says free resources. They are all free. It's a ton of resources, right? You can go get leveled up, right? And have that skill. If you've made a home lab, if you've done, some platform training like Range Force or Hack the Box or something like that. Those are all security projects. It doesn't have to be building something. That is a project, but it's not the only project. Here's a project. I wanted to go get my OSCP. I set up a plan. My project was to do it. I set it up. I had a schedule. I executed to it. I trained. I took my test. Got my OSCP. Boom. Right? Like that is exciting. And you can show your pride, right? Like, why was it exciting for you? Like the question qualified it as exciting. So that is what I would advise on that. You're probably better off getting this question because it's much more versatile. How a piece of malware traverses from the attacker to the victim using the OSI model. Okay, so this one's a bit more technical. What he says, it depends on the person. I would argue it depends on the job. And we're going to get to Russ's question here in a second. So a piece of malware traversing from the attacker to the victim using the OSI model. So OSI, if you don't know, it's like basically how a network stack works on an endpoint or a computer, right? So like when you pull up the browser to watch this live stream, all the traffic that I am spitting into my microphone right now is going down my stack, across the internet, and up your stack. So that's how normal network traffic works. So when he says a piece of malware traverses from an attacker to a victim, you'd have to qualify this. Like, what malware are we talking about? It could be, it's not really going across the OSI stack. All the data is going to go down and up, but some malware actually builds itself on your computer. It's not malware until like it builds itself on your computer. So this to me would not be a InfoSec Analyst 1 type job question. I mean, maybe Malware Analyst 1, but this is a little bit more complicated and technical, which is fine. But just know, and if you don't know the answer, just you say, honestly, I haven't worked with malware or something like that. It depends. Okay, so we're going to take some questions from the audience really quick. So Russell's here saying, my favorite question is, what excites you every week with your role at company? Whenever the interview gets, so that's cool. So Russell actually, every job interview is going to have a segment at the end, or it should have a segment at the end where they ask you, what questions do you have for us? By the way, do not ever have zero questions for them. Don't always have questions for them. Don't have zero questions. That's not a good look. Okay. What's the corporate culture? What's the team structure like? What's something that makes this company different from other companies? Those are all fine questions that are generic and you can take and apply in any way. Russ is flipping the script back on them and saying, what gets you excited about this job? Like, why do you like working here? That's good. And this would be very telling because the person's going to have to give you a non-objective answer. It'll be subjective to them and be quite telling too. So very nice. We got another question here from Pin. Is Greylog the best free community edition SIM? Which one SIM should I use if I want to use a community edition? Yeah, I like Greylog. I mean, which is the best really is subjective, right? So Greylog is good. The Elk Stack, which uses Greylog uses that. I think I want to say it's like Kibana is the front end, which would be like the SIM that you're interfacing with. That's good. Check it out. If you are into Greylog, Pin, check out Eric Capuano and Recon InfoSec. They use Greylog, and Eric actually has been like a champion of Greylog for as long as I've known him. And they've got great content out there, so you can get that. Okay, moving on to the other questions here. How do you see a paradigm shift from layered security to zero trust? Okay, so here's an interesting question, and here's what I'm going to tell you about this. Oh my gosh. Okay, here's the interesting question here. yes. Okay, so the question is asking you about several things here. One, it's asking you about, do you understand, like, do you follow cybersecurity? Because there is a switch, a shift as we kind of go cloud-based and people have mobile devices everywhere, and people working remotely. The idea of zero trust and the importance of the identity is becoming more and more important, for lack of a better term, in the way that we implement cybersecurity at a programmatic level. The layered security with the defense in depth, there's still value in that, but the ideas of like the castle with the moat and the gate comes up and the firewall does everything, those days are gone. That infrastructure doesn't really work anymore. You still need it, but you need more than that. Okay, so the basis of this question is, are you keeping current in like modern cybersecurity macro level issues? So micro level issues would be like, yesterday in the news, some software developer got a huge bug bounty because he exploited open source software that many vendors use to push malware into it. And he got a huge bug bounty. That was in the news yesterday, February 11th. Okay, you can Google it. That's micro level, right? So staying smart on that's interesting. But at the macro level, knowing about these big paradigm shifts, that will tell an interviewer that this person follows what's going on, understands what's going on within the cybersecurity industry. Again, this question, while a good question, I would not ask this of a entry level, InfoSec analyst 1 candidate. It's just not fair to expect them to be current on a macro level issues in the industry or shifts in the industry. But you can get questions around, like I always ask the question, how do you stay current? Like, what do you do to stay current in cybersecurity? It's kind of a micro version of this question. The reason I ask it is because I want to know two things. One, what sources do they use? I go to all sorts of sources all over the place to stay current. But what kind of sources do you go to? If you don't go to any, or you give me some like lazy answer, then chances are you don't really stay current. If you do give me an answer, like it's going to kind of tell me like where you go get your information, like, kind of the flavor of the information that you're getting. And two, getting back to your passion that we talked about earlier, do you have passion for the field? What gets you excited for cybersecurity? Like, if you aren't really staying current, like, by the way, here's like an ugly truth. And if you're in the comments, there's 23 people here and you work in cybersecurity, I'd love your comments on this one. But here is a truth. You have to stay current on cybersecurity, like issues, or you're going to get left behind. Like, yeah, you could take a week off, you could take a month off sometimes, but like for the most part, you can't just reach a level and then just be like, whatever, Jesus, take the wheel. Like, I'm just going to cruise control for the rest of the way. Like, you're going to get left behind. You have to stay current because it's a cat and mouse game. Every time we do something to protect ourselves, the bad guys, the criminals, they find a way to circumvent the control. So then we implement a new control, and then they implement an attack, and then they implement. So it's a constant cat and mouse game, and the focus shifts, right? So like ransomware is huge right now, and it's not going away because it's so successful. So now we're putting a lot of thought, a lot of eggs in the ransomware basket, and we're looking at that. Yeah, phishing's still important. That's a big one. But here's something like business email compromise. This is where you like trick a business into sending money to a criminal, right? By like various ways. I'm not going to get into that in this talk. But anyways, that is like the FBI reported as like a $1.7 billion in 2020 crime, right? It's almost a multi-billion-dollar crime. And we talk about it a little bit, but it's not nearly as much as the ransomware, just to emphasize how important ransomware is right now. But like, we're constantly shifting on what the bad guys are doing. At the end of the day, we're defending the organization. We're protecting the data and the systems and making sure that they can function correctly in order to enable the business to do what it's doing. And the bad guys are trying to find any way. It's not like they just have like one playbook and they just keep running into the wall, whether it works or not. No, they're dynamic. They shift. They have different motives. Like some of them are activism focused. They're trying to disrupt. Some are financially motivated. Some are nation state threat actors that are trying to shift powers geopolitically. I mean, and there's only one internet, people. There's only one internet, and we're all playing on it. So the battlefield and our commercial space and everything else, it's all on the same plane. So anyways, I went off on a bit of a tangent there, but my point is you have to stay current. I guess that was a really long way to say that you have to stay current, and there's lots of ways to do it. A lot of people say Twitter in those interview questions, and I'll tell you, I always ask, okay, who on Twitter do you follow? Like, who are you getting your information from? Because I agree, Twitter is an excellent place to stay informed, very timely information, but it kind of feels like kind of a lazy answer if you can't tell me who on Twitter that you actually follow. So anyways, let's move on. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. So Pin had another question. Detecting DNS tunneling attacks, which free tool can do a job in detecting DNS tunneling attacks? All right, we're not going to handle that right now. Stefan's, I have no idea how much knowledge do I need to get a SOC job? What is the expected level? So Stefan, that question's a good question. How much knowledge do you need to get a SOC job? So if you're talking entry-level SOC job, then it depends on the organization, right? So some larger MSSPs who are like hiring, 100 SOC analysts, right? Like they might have a lower bar to jump over in order to get in there. And then like a smaller firm may have a higher bar, but they might have entry-level programs and stuff like that. So what I would say is, as a kind of a catch-all explanation on what kind of knowledge you need or how much knowledge you need, I would say you have to know how a network works. Definitely have to know how a network works. You should have some concept of around like what different types of attacks look like. You don't have to fully explain them. You don't have to know the ins and outs and the difference between like, Loki bot and Snake, like ransomware. Like you don't have to get into the nuance. It's just knowing ransomware is important. And like, what are those attack vectors? So like, how does malware get on endpoints, right? Like phishing, tricking a user to install it, a vulnerable external system, USB drive dropped in, physical security, like breaking in and installing something locally. Those are all those things, but just understanding that. And then having played with some actual SIEMs, have your hands dirty with SIEM tools and kind of understanding like incident response workflows and stuff like that. So for SOC Analyst 1 job, I think you're going to be in a very good position if you do those things that I just said. Because basically you can sit down day one and not know exactly how to do the job, but you understand like the tech that is there and the concepts that are being applied. So like when an alert comes up and says there's something happening here, like source and destination, right? You're looking at network logs, source and destination IP addresses. Well, you know what an IP address is because you understand networking. So when it says source and destination, you're not confused. You like literally know that this is, Janet's computer in accounting, and this is a C2 server in Europe. That's probably not great, right? Maybe like some indicator of compromise, like IP addresses came out in some threat feed or something. So, okay. So that's what I would say about that. Let's see. Have you hacked? If yes, hire the person. Have you hacked? Okay. Philippe Mendoza says, who has the biggest responsibility securing the network, and how does that person get better at it? Wow. Okay. So this is an interesting question. So the question is, who's got the biggest responsibility securing the network? So the reason they're asking this question, or why an interviewer may ask this question, is because they want to see what the candidate's perception is of how a network is secured or how an organization is secured. Do they know like kind of the different roles that would be involved? And then furthermore, as additional information, do they understand how to break out like the pie of responsibility for that security. And then how does that person get better at it? That's kind of like a fairly easy question, right? You can like get skills, you can train. If you want to be really clever, you could say like when you have an incident, like when you have a really, really bad day because something really bad happened, there's a lot of there's a lot of knowledge you gain that day. If you've ever had to suffer a breach or a really crappy incident, you learn a lot of stuff that day. So as far as the biggest responsibility is securing the network, some interesting things there, right? So like, is it the information security office? Is it the infrastructure team? A lot of people would say that cybersecurity, information security is everybody's responsibility at an organization, which is why it's so important to train your staff. But that's an aside. So you could throw those questions in. For biggest responsibility, what I would say, it's probably not a popular answer, but what I would say is really management bears the greatest responsibility for securing the network, because management needs to set the tone that security is important, that, network admin, you need to secure this. Firewall guy, it needs to be right. Vulnerability management girl, we got to get it patched. Like, hey, infrastructure team, I understand it sucks, but we got to have a downtime. Like, none of that's happening if management is aloof to the idea or not supportive of the idea of cybersecurity, and it's just there for compliance. So that's how I would answer that question. But I wouldn't say there's a wrong answer, but just what they're asking here is what is your understanding and depth of knowledge around how information security is actually owned at an organization. Okay. So if you don't have any, like, a lot of people go deep on the tech side of it. That's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the tech side is wicked fun, but I want you to understand that there is a program like going on. Like, if you want to have a decent cybersecurity program, like for an organization, you have to have structure. You have to be working towards goals. You have to have both administrative, operational, and technical things going on. It's not just all tech. I'll tell you what, you can't just buy security, right? Like, vendors will tell you that you can. Like, here's 250 grand for an email gateway, email security gateway. Awesome. Zero fishes coming into your network, which is not true, but let's just assume that you threw $250,000, $500,000, $1 million at a security appliance. Good to go. That doesn't stop your staff from using their personal email, like, because they don't know any better. And it, like, oh, the new email gateways, like, it keeps stripping my .zip file from my email. So I'm just going to use my Gmail, right? These things happen. And now your email gateway is doing nothing except, blocking the traffic it's supposed to. So it's more than just tech. All right. Moving. Oh, well, let me check these comments, guys. Do some cybersecurity companies allow shadowing to learn for people with no experience? That's John's question. So John, yes, some organizations do. You're more like, I mean, in my experience, you're more likely, and it's far easier to find resources, like Stefan's saying here on the internet, right? So if you go, I put it in the comments earlier. If you go to my website, simplycyber.io, on the top right, I have a page for free resources, and it's just literally tons and tons of free resources that you can get experience with. Also, I don't have it prepped or anything like that, John, but if you go to my YouTube channel, I did a video last November on how to get in cybersecurity with no experience. And it was really, really well received. And I answer a lot of the questions on how to do what you're asking to do. As far as shadowing, I haven't really seen it, and I'll tell you why. Cybersecurity, you're typically dealing with some like real stuff, right? You're dealing with like stuff that I don't want to say you have to be read in on, but like you're dealing with like all the warts and like the bad stuff going on at the company, like things you wouldn't put on the front page. Like, not that you're doing anything illegal, nefarious or anything, but like when crap is going on, or you have like, where are you weak? Where are you vulnerable? Like that, those things all come out and you're openly discussing those. So if you have someone who is there that is not part of the organization, not, obligated to the organization, you can't really talk about that stuff. I guess maybe you could get NDAs, but for the most part, cybersecurity, it's one of those fields where it's just difficult to have shadows. I've done an intern program. I've run an intern program, and we kind of cushioned around those things, but it's difficult in cybersecurity. Yeah. So pin comments here. You need to understand networking, OS, requests, network attacks. So how web browsers work and stuff like that. Malware analysis definitely helps. Intrusion detection stuff, and some good vibes. Yeah, Pin. I love good vibes, man. Thank you. All right, let's get back to the interview questions here. Of course, there's some fun ones in here, Xbox or PS5. I don't really like asking fun questions in interviews. I know that sounds like a Debbie Downer, but like for me, it's like we only have an hour to talk, and I guess if I already decided that you were going to get the job, I might ask you that fun question because we're going to be coworkers. But for the most part, I try to stay on schedule and on point because we're trying to find out if you're a good fit. All right, without adding software or hardware, how do you harden this network? What actions could you take? I find some can answer, but most don't do well. Those do answer well or ask for current config are my best analysts. All right, so yeah. So without adding software or hardware, how do you harden this network? Again, that's a good question, right? You can't add anything to this network. Make it more secure. What do? Now, if you're sitting there with a blank look on your face, it's good. It's a good thing we talked about this, so you can think about it. But configuration is a huge piece of information security, right? So you can think about like all of these like IoT devices, Ring doorbell, Google Home. There's all sorts of IoT devices. If they come from the factory default credentials like admin or guest admin or root, whatever it is. Mirai botnet a few years ago took advantage of this and scanned the whole internet and just compromised the crap out of everything that had default admin credentials. That's why the Mirai botnet had 500,000 bots in it, and they were able to use it as a focused denial of service weapon, is because those devices were misconfigured. So this question, to me, that there's really one obvious answer, and it's to configure the devices. So here's like something I want to share with you guys. All right, when you're being asked a question about hardening something or making it more secure, or what do you do with this situation, I want you to use this framework, or at least this is what I use. I would encourage you to use it. And I don't think I've ever said this on the channel before, so this is a hot take. All right, stop for a minute, ask those qualifying questions. What are we talking about? What kind of company? What kind of data? What's the infrastructure? Then stop and think about it at the layers, right? Think about the application layer. Think about the operating system layer. The application is always going to sit on the operating system. Think about the network layer, right? The operating system is going to sit on hardware. We'll just assume physical security, so the operating system is going to sit and communicate over a network. Think about the network layer, where all the data flows. Then think about the physical layer, because all of that takes up physical space somewhere, right? It could be in a data center. It could be under someone's desk. So when you're answering those questions, what ends up happening is people are a little nervous, right? And they ask, how do you harden this? And they might go straight for the network layer and be talking about the network layer, all sorts of network layer stuff, right? Like, don't plug things into the switch rack unless they actually have to go. Make sure you configure them this way and that. Make sure the switch closet door is locked. That would be physical, but they hone in on what they're comfortable with, and they kind of miss the other pieces of fruit on the tree. So if you stop and go in with like a framework for these type of questions and say, at the application level, what could we do without adding or removing hardware? Well, you could configure the app to require login into the application. Okay, that's just one thing, but like it's a configuration. Now you can go down and you could do more. You can go down to the operating system level, right? How do you harden the network? I mean, you could say patch it. That's technically adding software. I would argue that they mean more like adding a new product in, but patch the OS, configure the OS to not have to not use like deprecated algorithms for the encryption, stuff like that. Like think about each layer. What could you do at the network layer? What could you do at the physical layer? I think that'll give you a much richer answer. And like no matter what the question is, you can kind of use that 4-layer stack to think about your answer. So hopefully that part helps you guys if you find yourself in an interview. And by the way, real quick, thank you for being here. Right? It's 4:45 on a Friday, and we're talking cybersecurity, and I love it. So I just whatever. I appreciate it. I wanted to thank you. So let's keep going here. It's 4:59 on a Friday afternoon. You see alert. Do you leave over the weekend or spend a bit extra time looking into it? Okay, this question. I mean, if any candidate responds with, "Well, I'm punching out and going home," that may be how you feel, but that's going to be like a red, like the darkest red flag possible. Bad guys don't, they don't take the weekend off, right? And you can't either, which is one of the tough trade-offs of working in a SOC, of working in on the blue team side of things. So just to be aware of that. Let me turn this up a little bit. Kind of clean up that green screen behind me here. Oh, good. Hey, you know what? Playground. Thank you for staying up with us late. 10 p.m. man. I appreciate it. I really do, and I'm glad that you're finding value in this. Let's keep going so we can get him tucked in before 10, or her tucked in before 10. How do you keep on InfoSec news? Okay, so I talked about this one already. If you're not staying current on InfoSec news, I strongly encourage you to do that. I actually want to share something with you guys right now. Hold on one second. I got to pull it up in a different tab. But I have been listening to this. I have no like affiliation with this group. I'm just telling you what I do right now. Come on. Okay, check this out. Let me change my screen really quick here. Okay, check this out. This is a podcast called Cybersecurity Headlines. It's part of the CISO series, and they just started doing this recently. But check this out. 5 to 7 minutes. They publish it every morning at like 6 a.m. I actually have it pre-configured in an automatic routine that when I get my coffee, that podcast starts playing. It's 5 to 7 minutes. And like I just told you about that guy with the open source and the bug bounties, and he got couple $100,000, and he like tucked in malware into the supply chain pipeline. I heard about it on this podcast. Like if you don't have 5 minutes a day to stay current on cybersecurity, I'm not saying you don't need to work in cybersecurity, but come on, man, it's 5 minutes and you can get like a full briefing on what you need to know about. So I would strongly encourage you, if you're kind of like picking at things here, let me get rid of this banner. It's starting to distract me. If you're picking at things, but you're looking for a more comprehensive way to like get your cybersecurity news, get it consistently. Check this out. This is high quality, good stuff. Really have been enjoying it. I will say that they have like a commercial that's about like 15 seconds in the middle of the podcast. So it's like awkward. You almost have to listen to it because it's awkward to like skip it. But it's 15 seconds. So, I mean, like 15 seconds is worth it of my time in exchange for getting this podcast. So check that out. I'll put a link in the show notes. What am I talking about here? Let me put a link in the comments. If you guys want to check it out, go for it. Yeah, it looks like Russ says he's been listening to it for the last week over his coffee, and it's great. Thank you for the recommendation there too, or the support. Let's see. Here, let me get let's keep the train going on the Twitter box here. Here, let's go. All right, cool. Oh, reset. All right. All right, so I lost where we were. That's okay. I just asked if they can explain how DNS work. It's an instant insight into their knowledge level. Okay, so, Sash Rigby makes a joke about DNS doesn't work, but okay, so DNS works. It does. So DNS is domain name service. It's the way that IP addresses and like, normal names like google.com, simplycyber.io. It's how those things translate to IPs. But it is important to understand, if you are going to work in cybersecurity, you should understand networking, and like core elements of networking is DNS, right? DHCP is another one, TCP/IP, UDP to some degree. So having some knowledge of DNS is a good one. If you don't know what DNS is, it could be a problem for you getting a job. You don't have to explain all the way up to like the authoritative servers and DNS cache poisoning. But if you do study DNS cache poisoning, you will understand DNS to a better degree. So that's a bit of a networking question. But again, networking is critical to understand. What did you learn from your most recent mistake, or what are you most proud of? I hear this question all the time. I feel like this is kind of a generic question. I typically, okay, so the way that I ask this question, excuse me. The way that I typically ask this question is, what's your biggest screw up? And if you have ever worked in IT, you have a screw up, right? Like, you cannot work in IT for any length of time and not have made a change to production when you shouldn't have, or, like deleted all email, or like, I mean, it's just, everybody's got a different story, but it's very telling on what happened. Not just like, you obviously remedied the situation. You didn't just like nuke prod and then run away and never to be seen again. You just like ghosted your employer ever after, right? You probably worked through something which involved freaking out, something technical, probably something with management. So that question is always interesting. It's something that someone is usually like playfully afraid to discuss. I don't want to say they're shamed by it, but like they're a little like blushed, right? Because typically in an interview, you're trying to put on your best representation of how you can like absolutely crush it at this job. And you're about to reveal something very vulnerable to you. And it's not asked to belittle or demean the person. What it gets at is understanding what exactly has this person faced and how did they deal with it. I've never had anyone say, I've never had anything bad happen, or nothing bad happens to me, or something to that effect. But that would probably not be a great answer either. Because like, if you can't identify your own, faults or something like that, or if they're saying like, oh, like I nuked prod, but it's someone else's fault because they didn't put controls in place to prevent me from nuking prod. Like, that could be like, oh, this person doesn't like to take ownership when they make a mistake. That's interesting. So something like that. But recent mistake, I mean, whenever I go into an interview, and I would, recommend it to you too, is I look at my own resume. I think back to jobs that I've done, projects I worked on, people I worked with, and I try to like basically bring back into my like, to use a nerd term, right? Bring up into my like quick access cache memory, things that I haven't thought about in years, just to have them kind of ready and thought about. So when I get asked a question about recent mistake, or how do you deal with conflict, or have you ever had to work with someone in a difficult way, I have those ready, ready to go, instead of searching, right? And by the way, there's nothing wrong if someone asks you a question and you want to think about it. There's nothing wrong with taking a few breaths. I wouldn't go like longer than 15 seconds really, but I mean, there's nothing wrong with like taking some breaths and then answering the question. Everybody understands that interviews can be nerve-wracking, okay? What is the first question you would ask yourself if you received an alert indicating a file was quarantined by AV? This could spark a conversation about their thought process, which is more important than being correct. Okay, so I agree with Lopsec here. Again, it's not about the right answer. It's your analytical ability. What is your thought process? How do you go from a problem to a potential solution? What's the hypothesis? What are you basing it on? Walk me through your thought process. That's really like, I don't like the questions where it's like, what port does Telnet listen on? Like, I can Google that. Oh, here's another like stunner. If you don't know this, if you don't work in the industry, cybersecurity people use Google too. We Google stuff all the time. We don't memorize everything, right? Some of it you just use all the time, so you just remember it because of frequency of use. But people use Google, right? But you can't Google a thought process. Maybe you say here when you received an alert that a file was quarantined by AV. You take a minute and think about it, right? I mean, first question you might ask is, well, can I look at it? Like, can I look in the AV client and see what the file is? Does it have a known signature? Does AV tell me anything I can do? You may want to ask, well, see, the thing is, you got to understand what it is before you can really ask any other questions, right? I mean, is it just like a mine coiner, like a bit coin miner in a browser extension or something like that? Like, that's less freaked out than it's LokiBot and it's running rampant on your network. Those two situations have two wildly different responses, right? Two wildly different responses. So the first question I suppose I would ask is, what is it that we're looking at that's on that box? So, anyways, that's how I would answer that. What's in your home lab? So this is another question. Like, it's kind of like your home network, but okay. So Nolly actually addresses what I was going to say. Asking what's in your home lab can be really unfair, right? Some people are not financially capable at this time to afford a home lab. Home labs aren't free. Like, I don't know about you, but last time I went outside, I didn't see home labs growing off trees. So that really is a tough question. The home network one is a little bit better because people are more likely to have a home network than a home lab. And even though I said that, I did say that having network isn't guaranteed, depending on certain situations. What are you most curious about? That's interesting. So that's a very open-ended question. I might even say like about cybersecurity. But Bob here, he may have said, he looks like he's the CISO at UW-Madison. So nice job. What are you curious about? He might be asking that just to find out what's this person, personal passion. Is it cybersecurity? Maybe they're into, I don't know, like race car driving or something like that. Like, that's fine. And that might spark another conversation of interest, but you're getting some kind of depth to the person. I would typically try to focus that question into something relevant to like the position or the job or the company or something like that. Because like, while it's cool that you're into race car driving, I don't see how that helps other than kind of giving me a little bit of perspective of you as a person. So that's a little bit of a tricky question. I might qualify that. I might even actually respond by reframing the question and say, well, what makes me most curious about the cybersecurity industry is how it's constantly changing in the cat and mouse game of it. Like, basically take control of the conversation and guide it into a way. Like, this is another pro tip. Take control of a conversation and use it to drive into areas that allow you to humbly brag about your previous experience and knowledge, right? So maybe next week we're going to talk to, not maybe, in a couple of weeks we're going to be talking to Joe Hudson here. I strongly recommend you attend this. This is a live stream just like this one, but it's going to be February 25th. And this guy's a cyber recruiter. He's an awesome guy. And he's going to come tell us how to like document things on our resume that are home labs and, hack the box, range force, like all the professional development stuff you've done, internships, all that stuff. He's going to tell us exactly how to document that on our resume and be able to share it. So having said all that, when you're driving a conversation, they might not ask you anything about, they may not ask you anything about your home lab or like, let's just say that you've done, like you built a WebGoat web application security home lab, right? WebGoat is like a really well-known platform for learning web application security. And let's just say that they don't ask you anything about this. When they say, what are you most curious about? It's somewhere down here. I'll find it in a second. What are you most curious about? You could say, well, when it comes to cybersecurity, or what I'm most curious about cybersecurity is how there's such a wealth of opportunity and interesting challenges. And while I know this position is for a SOC analyst, I'm curious to understand how, doing red offensive things would make me a better SOC analyst. So I actually built a WebGoat home lab and walked through all the exercises. And I really got a good understanding of how cross-site scripting and cross-site request forgery works and SQL injection. But really what it did was it set me up to understand how to see that on the SOC analyst side. It was really, really cool. And it really, it really fed my curiosity, right? You see how I didn't that is such a much more valuable answer than telling the guy that you like race cars. You could love race cars. You could be a race car driver on the weekends, and that's fine. But you're trying to get the job, right? Like you're trying to get that job. The whole reason you're interviewing, I assume, is to get the job. So giving answers that help you achieve the initiative should be your focus. That should be your objective. Okay. Oops. Sorry. I'm getting all frothed up over here, people. All right. Okay. Let's see. All right. So think back to when you were a kid. Okay, we're not going to do that one. Previous name of Wireshark. This would basically just show how old you are, right? Wireshark used to be called Ethereal back in the day. Yeah. So I agree with Nathan here. And we've talked about this on the show. Really, yeah, right. The hiring manager hates race car driving, and please see yourself out. Thanks, Playground. So Nathan asked a question here that I love, and we've talked about this. We've talked about this already in the episode. Security analyst role is generally more entry level, right? That's what I've been saying. So some of these questions about the paradigm shift from on-prem to cloud, that's not fair. But how have you been learning about security and keeping up? That's a classic. You should expect this question to be asked of you. And we've already covered it at length. Maybe you're doing that podcast I showed earlier. Maybe you're listening to my YouTube channel weekly. Maybe you're on Twitter, but who are you following on Twitter, right? So there's tons of answers. You should totally be doing it. And you should be easily able to knock that one out of the ballpark. Do not lie, by the way. Please do not lie. I've had people lie to me about what do they do to stay current. Because I asked them a follow-up question and they weren't able to answer it. And it was we're like looking at each other like, we both know that you're lying. Oh, this is so awkward. Okay. Let's see. Provide an example of a security solution that incorporates the CIA triad and why the CIA triad is so important to the role of security analyst. Okay. It is foundational. I haven't really ever asked a candidate about the CIA triad, but literally, your first day, you're still green. You got your lunchbox. You're wearing your best outfit. You walk into Security Learning 101. Literally, there's going to be a picture of the CIA triad on the board, right? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Understand it. It literally is the key tenements. It's the primary security objectives of cybersecurity. It's what we're doing here, right? Those are the three. Any control we put in place ever, firewalls, AV, patching, multi-factor, they all map to one or more of the CIA triad. Now I am older, so I came up with that. There's two more that I'm not even going to mention because I'm part of the old regime who I don't recognize the other two of the to make it five. So we're not going to talk about that, but you definitely should know the CIA triad. Now, thank you. Yeah, Russ agrees. Prime directive of security. It's so critical. So the question is, provide an example of a security solution that incorporates the CIA triad and why the CIA triad is so important to the role of analyst. Okay, so I think I just bemoaned the importance of the CIA triad. So that would answer that part of the question. Now, security solution that actually incorporates all also incorporates the all three of them. I would have to think about that for a second. I mean, right. So DLP, well, I'm not going to answer that right now. I would really have to think about that, right? Because all three of them is a little tricky. I guess you could say, well, I mean, let's run through it, right? So like, what's a easy one? So multi-factor, that keeps confidentiality. Well, encryption, that's not really a solution. Well, I guess you could argue encryption as a security solution. I'm being incredibly liberal here, but encryption would probably be the best answer, right? Because you can encrypt communication so the confidentiality is met. You can use asymmetric encryption to sign messages. That way the integrity can't be messed with. And then availability. Encryption doesn't really help with availability. Damn, I don't know. It's tough to find all three on one solution. I don't know. Maybe I'd get partial credit for that question. All right. Tell me about yourself. Before I ask, go through my background so you can know who you're talking to. Oh, so you know what's interesting? So here is something that I subscribe to, that it's a philosophical difference. You'll hear different people giving advice from different perspectives. So tell me about yourself. Like, again, I am there to get the job. That is why I'm there. Like, you look great and I'm glad we're talking, but I'm here for the job. Like, I'm not here for anything else. Okay. I'm not here for the free Danish. It was delicious. I'm here for the job. So when someone says, tell me about yourself, I will say things like, I'm a husband, I'm a father. I love, I'm passionate about cybersecurity. But I'm not going to go deep on anything like the race car driving. I'm not going to go deep into like jobs I've had, like in high school, like line cook at the pub. Like, I'm not going into that because it doesn't matter. Like, it gives me a little bit of context, but you can do that with like 2 to 3 sentences. Oh yeah, like I'm a huge, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a huge New England sports fan. Like, super proud to see Tom Brady win the Super Bowl the other day. And professionally speaking, I love cybersecurity. I love the programs. I work on it in my own time, like, because I'm really passionate about it. Just the other day I was doing this WebGoat challenge, and I found it really interesting. And I watched this live stream with Jerry Ozier, and like you can tell them about you. And again, kind of navigate the conversation into things that they can ask about later, or you can reference later. You're bringing them into the front of your mind. So you can't be completely, like, what's the word I'm thinking of? Like static or robotic. I mean, you do have to have personality, but, I always tend to go towards what can I do to help this organization? And let me explain that. I mean, it's important to understand I'm a father and a husband because that's important to me. Like, what is important to me, I'll tell you about. But things that are not important or can't help me help you solve your cybersecurity problems, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about that in a beer after I get my job here, okay? Security. All right, so it's 5:10. Hey, I know Playgrum, you're really pushing it hard, buddy, staying up past 10, and I appreciate that. I'm going to answer a couple more because it's getting late here on the East Coast, and I'm going to promote a couple things here. I already told you about the Joe Hudson thing. I hope you guys have been getting value out of this. I hope this is helping some of you if you are going for interviews, that you answer some of these. I'm going to answer a couple more right now, but as people jump in and jump out, I just want to let you know how much I really appreciate and how much I'm enjoying this. All right, so Wales Brown here is talking about typical Windows PE file header. Okay, so that's interesting. This is borderline not really entry level, right? So if you're doing malware analysis or your SOC analyst or something like that, like the Windows executables .exe or .dll, they have a really well-defined file format that has this program does not run in DOS. You'll see that in an assembly. There's like this MZ prefix header. Like, basically it allows you to look at malware or look at any binary and see if it is designed to execute on Windows, right? So that's what this question's asking about. You either know the answer or you don't. I don't necessarily agree that this is a entry-level question here. Have you ever been so far to pretend and want to do more like, I don't know what that means. Okay. There's no AV. the LAN is connected to the internet by a consumer COTS router. If you've identified any issues with that scenario, what would be your steps to remedy that? So this is interesting. So if you've identified any issues, right? So he kind of leaves it open-ended that the candidate might say that there's no issues. But I mean, LAN connected to the internet by a consumer COTS router. I mean, this is effectively like most people's home network. So, kind of work backwards. Use that stack I told you about earlier: application, operating system, network, physical, right? Issues with that scenario, right? So what does it look like from the internet? Like, do you have exposed service? Like, we're at the network level. Do you have exposed services listening? Does that consumer router, usually those things have like embedded firmware operating systems, but like, does that router have vulnerabilities like at the application level or at the firmware level? When was the last time it was updated? Or is anyone able to remote into it? Do you have any visibility if that happens? There's a bunch of questions there, but that's just really like a home lab thing. Again, there's a lot of meat to pick on that bone. And don't fall prey to just going straight to your strengths and answering questions about one specific niche of it. I mean, it's important, cover it, but don't get don't get blinders on and miss like a greater opportunity to expand on your knowledge and share with the interviewer about how much you know about that particular question. These open-ended questions are great because if you stay on topic and you continue to answer the question, all you're doing is getting yourself points in the win column. All right. Someone sent you a phishing email to look. I'm sorry, I got all sorts of stuff going on my screen. Someone sent you a phishing email to investigate. What would you look into first? So this is a good question. So phishing emails are like, they really are fundamental 101 stuff. Like, you probably should know what a phishing is, even if you don't work cybersecurity. And you should know kind of like what to look for. So this one is basically like awareness training 101. Like, there's a couple ways you could answer this question, right? So you could look just at the email itself, like misspellings, like senses of urgency, all these other things. You could look at the headers. Like, if you wanted to give a more like, cool answer, you could look at the headers and see like, where it came from, who's the actual send to, is there a reply to that's different than the send from, those type of things. You could do that. Certainly not the first thing you would do because it says, what would you look into first? But you could also, if there's an attachment, investigate that, see if that is suspicious. If it's part of a campaign, right? So there's things out there like, let me see, like there's threat feeds, right? That you can subscribe to see if an email is part of a campaign that's a well-known phishing campaign. So not the first thing you would do, but certainly this is like email 101, right? And they're basically just wanting to know if you have basic information security awareness. Okay, so let's do one more, and then I'm gonna call it a wrap. All right. Would you take 50 grand for the first year of salary? That's not really material here. Everybody's got a different situation with that. All right. So this is a fun one to end on. Where does the greatest threat exist? Again, so this is a open-ended question that allows you to demonstrate, or you'll likely answer this in a way that indicates to the interviewer what your strengths are, or where you're likely to feel comfortable and gravitate to. So you could ask some qualifying questions with this one, like greatest threat to what? Greatest threat to my organization, greatest threat to mankind, greatest threat to the nation. Probably you're interviewing for a job, it might be greatest threat to the organization. If this person says, no, the greatest threat ever that existed, I mean, that's kind of like way open-ended, right? So like thermonuclear weapons are pretty much greatest threat. We don't even use them. That's how threatening they are. Like, that's probably not what you wanted the answer to, right? So you can answer this a world of different ways. I'm not gonna answer it because we could go all sorts of different ways. But this is just another good open-ended question. And this whole thread, I encourage you to check out this whole thread. Here, I'm gonna put it in the comments here. Yeah. So Pin says ransomware is the greatest threat of our age. Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, ransomware is certainly effective. I would. Well, I don't want to say it on the feed. Like I have thoughts on this, but I don't want to say them publicly. But anyways, I put a link in the show in the description below or in the comments. Go ahead and follow that if you want. But if you're going for an interview, if you're preparing for an interview, these kind of questions are excellent practice, right? Because they get your mind going, they get you thinking. And if you come across a question, like a real question, not one that's like, what's your favorite alcoholic drink or something like that, like real substantive cybersecurity analyst type questions, and you don't know the answer, spend a few minutes and Google it, look it up, like inform yourself. The only thing that you're not going to be able to do is understand the questions that are inappropriate for security analyst one, right? So like that paradigm shift one from on-prem to cloud, like that one's not really fair, but maybe you have an answer for it. It just won't be too deep. But so anyways, yeah, thank you, everybody. I really had a good time. I'm going to link to my my website here. If you are, want those free resources, they're right here. Okay. They're right here. And I mean, we've just got a ton of them. You can click on any of these, like YouTube channels, right? I mean, they're not laid out too great, but they're all here. Here's mine. Here's some other ones that I promote or have, found value on. So you can check all that out and just, dig in, connect with the community, get on the Discord, hit me up. I'm on LinkedIn like all the time. So I would love to engage with you guys. And I wish you all the very best with your interviews. If you have some great news or even, a tough story of an interview that went sideways, share with the community. That's one great thing. If you don't work in cybersecurity and you're looking to get into cybersecurity, it is such an inclusive, friendly community. There was some toxicity and there is still a little bit, but you can avoid it. Like for the majority that I have found, it's just a great community that really cares about each other. So come on in, the water's fine, and I look forward to engaging with you. So until next time, I hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you for spending an hour and 15 minutes with me today. Take care, everybody.